to thanks, Joe. I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have four lovely panelists with us here today. Our first panelist is Anu Rao. She's a registered professional biologist, writer, facilitator with a focus on marine conservation and restoration. She has worked on ecosystem-based research, conservation, mapping, planning, policy, restoration, and stewardship projects with Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities and organizations from Canada's 3 coasts and in 12 other countries. She is also the author of the nonfiction book, One Earth, People of Color Protecting Our Planet. Welcome, Anu. We're very happy to have you with us here today.
Really honored to be part of this panel.
We also have joining us today Ora Lewis. Ora Lewis is a member of the Métis Nation and is of Otipimisquak, European, Cree, and Ojibwe descent. She's a cultural educator at the Cheakamus Center's Indigenous Longhouse programs, and most recently a cultural facilitator for the Ocean Bridge program. She is passionate about teaching the beautifully complex Indigenous food systems of North America, pre-colonial impact. A lifelong learner, she loves sharing with others her knowledge of native, wild, and edible and medicinal plants. She's extremely grateful to acknowledge her teachings from local elders and educators about multifaceted uses of plant species specific to the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, where she resides as a guest. She is honored to carry the nickname Siseme, which means bee in the Squamish language. It reminds her to help spread knowledge with purpose and gentleness. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Nora.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm pretty excited. Thank you.
Our next panelist is Cyril Noel. She's a spatial planner with expertise in marine and coastal environments. Being born and raised on the river island of Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, Cyril is described as a soulful philosopher who believes that spatial challenges can be mediation through careful observation and understanding of the reciprocal relationship between humans and the environment. She currently works as a program specialist for Oceanwise, is a global shaper in the Montreal Hub, and is currently a local Pathways Fellow. Her project is focused on examining the scope for developing blue public space within the River Islands Park networks in order to conserve sensitive coastal ecosystems while simultaneously fostering a blue generation within Montreal. She founded Audacité, a small organization dedicated to exploring the nexus between sustainable development and waterway literacy. For her work in sustainable development, Cyril was recently recognized as a Corporate Knights 2020 Top 30 Under 30 in Sustainability. Welcome, Cyril. Thank you for joining us today. Our fourth panelist is Betty Karpik. She is a creative professional and interdisciplinary artist who grew up in northern Canadian towns. She loves sharing her knowledge, ideas, skills, and enthusiasm. Betty is of Indigenous descent from the Nelson House Cree Nation of northern Manitoba. As an interdisciplinary artist, her practice is focused on installation and performance using writing, design, photography, drawing, and art making. She's made a sustained and visible presence, particularly at the community level. She's even created 2 pieces in collaboration with Ocean Bridge, Threading Water from 2019 and 2020, and the Shorelines Project, which is currently in progress. Welcome, Betty. So glad you could join us.
Thanks. It's really a delight to be here and to see some familiar names and faces popping up. So let's have a good afternoon.
Thanks. And to facilitate this call and these lovely conversations, I'd like to introduce Dabney, especially for the folks who haven't gotten the chance to know her or her work yet. Dabney is a member of the Tlingit First Nation from Juneau, Alaska, and is Afro-Indigenous. She works with Ocean Bridge Pacific as the Indigenous Knowledge and Engagement Program Specialist. She has an MA from UBC, where her research looks at settler imaginative practices, colonialism, and tourism in Southeast Alaska. So thank you for joining and facilitating, Dabney, and I'll turn it right on over to you.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm really excited as the conversation goes and to hear from our panelists. Yeah, feel free to turn on your video while we, hopefully WebEx can handle that, but yeah, to show your face and feel free to contribute in the chat as well. Any thoughts you have after each question, and then there will be a time at the end for participant questions as well. So we will go through 6 or so questions, and we'll start alphabetically with our panelists and kind of rotate through for 3 to 5 minutes per question per panelist. So the first question is, what is the work that you do? And we'll start off with Anu.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. And again, I'm so honored to be on this panel with all of these amazing other humans and other women. Um, so I just want to acknowledge first where I am joining from. I'm here on the traditional unceded and ancestral territories of the Pomifgrim, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The colonial name is Vancouver, BC. Um, and the work that I do is a whole mishmash of stuff, but I am a conservation biologist. And at the moment, and for a lot of my career, I've been working independently and on contract. And right now, the 2 contracts that I have are pretty inspiring. One is working with Tsleil-Waututh First Nation on water quality policy. I'm managing a project with them on a collaborative model to update provincial policy that engages a whole range of industries and governments and health authorities and a lot of other people who all have an influence in or effect on water quality. And then the other work that I do right now is working on nearshore ecosystem restoration and mapping. So it's involved working for a small NGO called Sea Change Marine Conservation Society, but in partnership with Tsleil-Waututh Nation to remove debris, to plant eelgrass, and to restore marine riparian vegetation in areas that forage fish would use the beaches to spawn. And that is also very inspiring work. And I've as sort of related to that, I've been doing some mapping of eelgrass as well. And within both of those roles, I do a lot of facilitation. And so that's been a lot of people management and getting in front of rooms and helping to create participatory processes in a very technical kind of environment. And that's been challenging and fascinating at the same time and very rewarding. And the third part of what I do is that I'm a writer, and I'm currently mobilizing the book that Caitlin told you about, which is this one right here. It's called One Earth, People of Color Protecting Our Planet. And we'll be getting a bit more into my journey later on, but I am really happy to be here, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Looking forward to hearing about all the work that you do and your journey. Our next panelist is Aura. So the question is, what kind of work do you do?
Hi, everyone. I'm pretty excited to be here. Thank you for taking the time today to join us. And just like Anu said, I'm super grateful to be on a panel such as esteemed as this. It's very, very wonderful. I want to acknowledge that I am currently residing and learning and teaching and playing on the traditional territory of the Squamish people. And most specifically, I actually live in the former village of Chiakamis, which was a longhouse community in a village that is on the Chiakamis River. And that's where I'm at. So I'd like to acknowledge that. And what I do, I'm a cultural educator for the most part, and I really enjoy and I'm super passionate about teaching about the sort of complex but absolutely wonderful Indigenous food systems that are pre-contact or pre-colonial impact. And before the March shutdown, I worked as an assistant cultural facilitator in our Longhouse programs, where I am a resident at the Chuckamus Center, which is an outdoor learning facility in Paradise Valley outside of Squamish. As well, I do outdoor Indigenous education anywhere I can at the moment, which is, as so many people, far and few between opportunities, which is sad, but I know we're all doing our best. Yeah, and I am stoked any chance I get to talk to people, as a lot of you who have met me and on this cohort, to talk about food, plant medicine, and plants food medicine. So that's where I get pretty jazzed up. Did I just say jazzed up? Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Aura. Really excited to hear also more about the work you do and the journey and all of that. There are people from the Pacific cohort, or people who went on the Pacific learning journeys in this call, but then there are also people who we kind of opened it up to the larger program, and so there are other people as well. So that's really exciting. Our next panelist is Betty. So yeah, what is the work that you do?
Hi, everyone. So I'm an interdisciplinary artist. So I think that means I have full interests, and I like to integrate them in different ways. Community engaged artwork, because I'm interested in the voices of ages, abilities, and backgrounds. And I think using the universal language of art, we're able to give a more emotional and sensory response to some complicated and tough concepts. So basically what I like to do is to explore and playful ways with different people in different groups. So usually, with Ocean Bridge, about the ocean conservancy and water protection, I've designed two unite conversation, but also to build skills. And building skills is an important part of the work I do, because I feel that through our hands and a lot of our heritage and culture forward. And it's also a way to give voice to concepts that we experience these days. A lot of that discussion around tables and around academics on it, and I really love that about the type of work I do. And I just like the journey, and that's as important to me as the end result, but the end results are also nice. And I don't know, I feel like art's a great leveler. So that's why I like to do that kind of work. I feel like it's kind of nomadic kind of lifestyle for me, and that is totally my background with my my Cree ancestors. I didn't say where I was. I realize that. So I am on the shores of Gitchigami, which is Lake Superior in Robinson Superior territory. So I've been a guest on this land for over far northern Manitoba, and I grew up in a remote, isolated community. And I think too, growing up without television or easy access to outside the community. I mean, the broader community. It's kind of facilitated a kind of independence of doing things and working with community. So that's, that's very much carried forward for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Most everyone will recognize Betty from their Shoreline Project kit that they got in the mail. So this is a great time to remind you to do that. And I still need to do mine, but I'm really looking forward to it. And then our last panelist for this question is Siriel.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you for having me. Caitlin mentioned it, but I'll just reiterate that I'm really grateful to be living in the river island of Tiohtià:ke, which is also known as Montreal. So the work that I do, my 9 to 5 is with Ocean Bridge. I'm working on the Atlantic side with the Atlantic cohort. So yeah, that's really what I do for the most of my work. But then outside of that, I usually start my mornings with teaching students in China. So I also teach English, and that's something that really brings me a lot of joy. And it's really nice to connect with different types of people, and just like children are just so joyful. So it's really nice to just like be connected with people at that age early in the morning. It's a really nice way to wake myself up. And then outside of that, in the evenings, as Caitlin mentioned, I do work with the Global Shapers, which is kind of the youth division of the World Economic Forum. So there's a hub in Montreal, and there's lots of really interesting projects. When I first joined the hub last year, we were working on a cybersecurity project, which really doesn't have anything to do with environmental stewardship. But it's just to give you some context, I started on that project just because I had an interest. Like, it's something I didn't really know that much about. And that's how I enjoy learning. I like learning by doing things. So I just got involved in that. And then I found out that my skill set was better suited for the Sustainable Development Goals project. So I've pivoted onto that, which is really exciting. And the project is we're launching a lot of events and tool works, and just a way to socialize the goals within like younger Canadian leadership. So that's what the project is kind of picking up speed on. And then I think that's all I do. Oh yeah, and then Caitlin mentioned that I've started this kind of independent project to kind of look at whether there's a way to develop blue public space, because I'm an urban planner. I was trained as an urban planner, so we always talk about green spaces, which is like typically in urban settings, parks. We focus more on recreation spaces, but I find it very weird because it's not really green, where there's usually blue features, but it's never the focus. So there's actually a really wild opportunity, and things are just kind of intersecting, where Montreal is going to develop like one of the largest integrated parks within North America. So there's like kind of an opportunity to like explore, like, what does it look like? We're a river island. Like, what does it look like to have recreation space that's focused on blue rather than green? So yeah, just kind of developing that and thinking about that and seeing where that takes me. So yeah.
That's so cool. Thank you. Really looking forward to learning more about blue spaces and your work as an urban planner with 2 master's degrees. I don't know if that was in your bio, but like it should be. So cool. So I guess we'll move on straight into the next question, which really ties into this first question, and it's, why do you do the work that you do? So yeah. Okay, sorry. I guess we'll start with Aura. And the question is, why do you do the work you do?
Oh, but I'm moving towards being viewed as a older folk. in the general side of society. But I've actually come to teach this work that I'm doing currently really only in the last several years. So it's still really exciting. And I'm always reaching, I'm always pushing myself, I'm always trying to learn. Like, I can't sort of up sometimes because there's so much to learn. I feel like I have so little time. But basically, I do the work because I really want to push myself to be the type of people or that sort of have brought me to this path. So I want to model that, I guess. And I do a lot of work with children, primarily before the shutdown, my work was with children. And I guess I can vividly remember the camp counselor who, like at age 11, took us into the forest and taught us this thing called Eat the Forest. And it was like, and I just I never had through guys like that before. I grew up in a city. I grew up totally separate from my culture, or my Indigenous culture, with no sort of way into any kind of natural world things. And so, you know, that head exploding moment, I would like to be that for a child. And I want to hopefully experience and shape a person's journey and their connection to the natural world. That's why I do the work that I do.
Thank you. There are some like follow-up questions I could ask, but I think that they'll be answered maybe later on in the panel discussion. But just maybe I'll get your brain going on it before, and I think it would be really cool to hear how you started, because you said that you started just a few years ago. Well, not just a few years ago, but that you haven't been doing this forever. So I think it would be really interesting to hear how you kind of got started doing the work that you do maybe later, although I don't think it's that late. And yeah, and maybe talking more about like Eat the Forest. I think that sounds really cool. And then also how you work with children and how you learned from maybe elders in your life or other people that modeled these things to you. I think that would be cool. But I think we'll get to that in maybe if you have a quick answer, that'd be great, or we'll get to it as well in our question 5.
I think you asked me 4 different questions, so I'll choose one.
Sorry.
Yeah, I came to this work later in life because like so many people or Indigenous people or mixed ancestry as I am, that didn't have a chance to grow up in their own culture because of adoption. So my father was an Indigenous man who was adopted by a non-Indigenous family. And I always identified as an Indigenous person. Not everybody felt that way about me, but the older I got and having children was a big for me about identity, culture identity, seeking out the family that I didn't know. And I've always been interested in Indigenous traditional stories, but I grew up on the coast, so I had an opportunity to integrate myself with Coast Salish because that's where I am, and those were my opportunities. And if for those teachers and elders and educators encouraging me, I wouldn't be able to get to do the work that I'm doing today. So I am very grateful, hands up, grateful to them. And it's been life-changing. I mean, I always had an affiliation and a desire for such that I teach, but it wasn't until it was explained to me and guided that way. So I hope that answers one of those.
Great, thank you so much. We'll also dive more into like your journeys and how you came to be where you are later in the panel. So I think we'll be able to touch on different pieces of that more deeply. But thank you. And the next panelist is Betty. And the question is, why do you do the work that you do?
I feel like I've always been doing this kind of work, but if I wasn't living in this day and age, I might be doing different work. I'm not sure. I imagine we all would be. Yeah, so in the boreal forest and my family, who were really very, very closely connected seasons, and the survival in the north, and living quite a simple way. That's what I understood. I was in high school, and I mean, as entrancing as some trips to the bigger towns and cities, Winnipeg, for instance, were like really exciting, because there was kind of a disregard for, you know, unless you were urban, you were not seen as having that much to offer. So that was also kind of hard in a different way. I mean, we're at a time now where people are honoring Indigenous people, and everywhere. So, I mean, for me, sometimes just to be quiet about it. And I remember one time realizing, like, I knew a lot about plants and I knew the name of plants and purpose of all different plants, but I realized that it was more important to know different kinds of cars. And that was kind of a shock to me, to realize that. And maybe that's kind of created a lifelong resistance to cars, but who knows? So, like I said, I feel the language of art is so universal. A lot of times when I'm working with people, then they say I'm not artistic. Well, I don't even know what, and to learn how to play and to feel free to play. And without play, we don't have imagination. And without imagination, we can't kind of see a brighter future. We're going to be kind of stuck. So that's means to me, a sense of play and discovery. So I love when people kind of get excited about doing tried, or they've done it before, but they've haven't shared it. And honestly, one time I was working with with this group at Shelter House, and this man, he didn't participate in the actual making during like 2 months, and when I was going there once a week. But at the end, he came up to me and he said, and I'm like, that is the best thing anybody's ever said to me, because that's how it felt. Like, it didn't matter that he was just around. It was fulfilling to him just to be around. So that's the kind of work I like. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love that. I love thinking about play and joy and finding that, or like play and like being adults and still finding ways to play and through art. And I really like what you were talking about like art being a universal language, and that again, things about like imagination and yeah, I'd really love to hear more about that. Yeah, I think we'll get into it, but maybe if you want to say just a little bit more about the about art being a universal language, that would be awesome.
So yeah, I mean, we know that art around the entire world has the capacity to hold energy and thought. And I mean, as much as we look at all the, you know, when we look at the past, and we institutionalize the past now, which is really freaky. And we, you know, like it's all held in kind of, I don't know, language that's universal, but we want to put it in, just not, to me, the way in some ways it stilts it. So yeah, it seems like we all feel such pride in what we can do with our hands and with our in creating, but then we're also constrained by the way our society measures how we make things and fetishize it for sure, and fetishizes it. So all these things become limiting to our way of expanding on our imaginations. I'm going to keep it there.
Thank you. So much food for thought. I'm like really processing that. Yeah, definitely puts limits on, like, our society, I feel like does put limits on our imaginations. And I feel like especially as we get older as well. So the next panelist is Siriel. So the question is, why do you do the work that you do? Thank you.
So yeah, maybe I'll start with the Ocean Bridge piece.
Sorry, you're turning into a robot. Yes, it happened.
Let me try putting my headphones on.
Okay, thank you.
Is this any better?
Yes, perfect. Way better.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. So yeah, as I said I'll start with the Ocean Bridge piece last, but maybe that independent project that I'm working on for Blue Public Space, I think that's how I like maintain the attachment to my initial discipline. So I guess urban planning, that's how I'm just like keeping fresh in that. And it's interesting to me because that's, you know, what I studied for so long. And then my piece with the Global Shapers, I think why I do that is it's just like a really nice community. I find that I get a lot out of the community, like just in terms of interpersonal relationships, and it links on to also a wider international community, but also it's local. So I really enjoy that I can be in an organization and also directly have impact like within my own community. So that's really amazing. And then I mean, I teach English online just for a little extra cash because the hassle never stops. But I was thinking about it in preparing for this panel, and I think that my love of teaching like really started when I taught swimming lessons. I had a part-time job when I was in university, and I did that for 4 years. And so that's the connection to the water, I guess. But yeah, so I think ever since then I've really enjoyed teaching, but never really wanted to be a teacher in a brick and mortar kind of school. So I've kind of found different ways, and even through Ocean Bridge, it's an education piece that speaks to that part of who I am. And then yeah, I think I'll speak to the Ocean Bridge piece just more broadly as like water. I think that water is just like such a nice riddle. Like it can take you so many different places. You can look into WASH if that's your interest. Like it can be, you can look in economic activities that can happen in our offshore zone. There's just like so many possibilities. And as a marine spatial planner, that's what I love. That's what drew me to this as like a topic. So yeah, I think it's interesting because even though we're land-based mammals, so technically like waterways and seas, like those are not really the realms that we inhabit, but we've kind of essentially destroyed these realms that we've inhabit. So I like really, I don't know, that's like something I really think about, and like this is what's kind of drawing me to, yeah, continue to do this work, even though it was a long road to get here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Do you do you maybe want to talk a bit more about your work with? Do you have like a specific project that you've been working with in Blue Spaces or with global shapers that maybe you want to chat about for a few minutes?
Sure, yeah. So my concept of blue space is like a little bit new. I've done the academic research, and there's not really that many people talking about it in the way that I kind of want to develop it. So, I mean, I can speak about it, but it's quite there's not really a precedent. Is essentially, yeah, there's not really something to point to where I can be like, oh, they did this in this year, and this is a well packaged example. So I think that will be the limiting factor. The Montreal participatory budget has been opened, so I'm applying to kind of develop this project with the city. So I think working with people might give this project a little bit more direction, but it was essential. I started it because last year when I noticed that they had the spring flooding, like in the spring, we get a lot of flooding in the area where I live. And so I started thinking about that and just noticing the development patterns of the city, like, and what they're kind of favoring. It's like a lot of big McMansions. There's a lot of condos. Like everything's being paved over, and it just made me think like Montreal is a wetland, and just the knowing the urban development of the city and how things started in the old port, crept up the hill because of the reoccurring flooding. It's kind of like counterintuitive the way that we're developing the city. So it's just a way to kind of resist that kind of development, but also kind of kickstart a blue generation, because I know a lot of people, I'm born and raised in Montreal, know tons of people that can circulate for months without seeing the coast, which is wild to me because it's the second largest, most popular river island in the world, larger than Manhattan, or more populated than Manhattan, or sorry, larger than Manhattan in size. So it's just such a wasted opportunity, I think, in terms of city branding and in terms of like really having something to, it's like a part of our history. North America was kind of colonized through our waterways. So it's like, I don't know, it's an interesting thing to think about. And the project, I have an 18-page concept note, but more research has to be done because it's just, what is blue space? We could talk about that. I could talk about that forever.
Yes, I love that, and kind of reminds me of what you were saying earlier about the possibilities with water. And this feels like there are a lot of possibilities here with this project and with Blue Spaces, and then as well as like connecting to water in urban spaces and connecting community and kind of the ways in which I feel like maybe city planning and or things like that have kind of let down or been kind of a big piece of like climate change and stuff. So yeah, there's so much there for sure. Thank you. We'll dive deeper throughout with more questions later. But the next panelist for why do you do the work you do is Anu.
Hi, so that's a big question. My work, I guess I've always been interested both, well, not always. Once I became sort of had that kaboom moment in my undergrad of that I was interested in environmental work and in being surrounded by nature and having outdoor experiences. Um, it always, the social side of things always came up as well once I started working and traveling and experiencing different things. And so my career has been pretty roundabout windy, going from human rights and international development, and then deciding that I wanted to up my science skills and be an actual scientist, and what that would mean. And so I'm trained in Western science. I'm trained as a biologist, but no matter how hard I tried to be this hardcore biologist, like I'm going to study shorebirds, I'm going to study this, which I did study shorebirds for my master's. Whenever I tried to focus only on the biology side of things, I always felt like something was missing, someone was missing, and that it didn't seem right to just be working on the science side of things without understanding the context, without understanding the people, without understanding who was dominating the conversation, who was being left out of the conversation, whose lands we were on, where those people are, where their knowledge is. All of that kind of came and mixed up in me and made me kind of different from the biologists that I was working with at the time. And then just trying to do this work in different forums and finding myself in, I've worked for government, I've worked for industry, I've worked for different NGOs, and it took a while before I realized that I really only felt comfortable if I knew that the people I was working for, that the people I was working with shared my values 100%, that I shared their values 100%, and I knew for sure that I was on the right path. And so that's why it became very important to me, in this context where I'm working right now, to be partnering with Indigenous peoples and supporting Indigenous peoples whose territory I'm in to be achieving their stewardship goals. And so now it feels so much better for me to be leading meetings and leading workshops on behalf of and in partnership with an Indigenous nation, rather than being from the outside and trying to engage people into a process that is not their own. And I've taken that same kind of path with working with an environmental NGO and making sure that the work that I'm doing is directly in partnership with the nation whose territory we're working in. And that feels really good. And it's very possible. And it's very possible to integrate Indigenous science and Western science, to integrate culture, and hardcore biology, for lack of a better term, and being surrounded by people who share that holistic view makes me feel very comfortable and very satisfied that we're looking at things in the right way, and that we're working together in a way that is appropriate, and that celebrates the diversity of knowledge systems that are needed to be able to achieve environmental success. And I think that in doing this, we're also setting a good example for others, because there is a lot of resistance to doing a lot of this stuff. But I found that, if people are open to it, like the organization that I work with, they're entirely open to putting their money where their mouth is, to be able to establish partnerships. And yeah, so I think we're really setting new ground and building examples that others can follow, and I like that.
Thank you so much. That's really exciting. I'm super interested in hearing more about the work that you do. And I was wondering, like I said with everyone else, there will be the opportunity to kind of dive more into these questions as we go on. But I was wondering if you could talk a bit about, since you work with Tsleil-Waututh, that like Indigenous people are the original stewards of their lands and waters, and kind of you talked about wanting to work with people who share your values. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about kind of the process of your work and like co-creating and collaboratively working with nations. I don't know if you do like like I think you said you do monitoring, and I know that there are a lot of like Watchman programs and stuff. So, but we can get more into that later as well. But
So you want me to comment more on what it's like to work
yeah, just
collaboratively with nations?
yes. Sorry.
Sure. Um, yeah, I take my direction from the nation, and I'm very happy to do that. And I know the kind of work that they do and the kind of principles that they want to uphold, and I support those. And it's my way of, yeah, of working with and giving back as well. And so I've, and it took a bit of time to kind of develop the relationship and understand the nation, and I'm still learning, and I'm still learning from people there, and that's going to keep going. And yeah, so it's a matter of stepping back when I need to, and stepping forward when I'm asked to.
Great, thank you. So we'll move on to the next question. The next question is, what does stewardship mean to you? So Betty is our first panelist for this question.
I'd written some notes, but as we were talking this day, I just thought, wow, stewardship means something entirely different in 2020. It seems like such a soft word. So I think stewardship is about being uncomfortable and taking risks. And there's a sense of urgency in this work that we have to encourage people to listen and take action. It's not a time to be. So I feel also that stewardship is lonely. Sometimes, people will say, oh, I appreciate the work you do. And I'm like, well, the work is not just mine, it's everyone's. It's a collective responsibility. It's a responsibility for us as citizens. So it's frustrating. And I sometimes I take a measure of what I post on Facebook, and if it's something kind of fun and light, there's a response. But if it's heavy and if it's about the environment, people you can see them kind of ignoring it. And that's just a observation. But for me, stewardship is very personal as well, because I feel like growing up in Northern Manitoba, in Lake Rapids, my mother's community of South Indian Lake was impacted by the diversion of the Churchill River by Manitoba. It was in the 70s when I was, like a teenager. And it was a pretty prime example of their way of life. So at that time, South Indian Lake, before the flooding, was the second most productive whitefish fishery in North America. And the community wasn't a reserve. So there were Indigenous people, but there were also some white people, and fully integrated into the community. But the land was permanently flooded and destabilized, and people lost their livelihood. And so witnessing that as a young person, it was hard to articulate, but it just seemed like a tsunami came up north and just eradicated things. So that was a huge influence on my way of caring, which I don't think shifted, but it became a little more urgent, I would say. But it really bugged me as well when I would talk about it and people would say, oh, you have intergenerational trauma. And I'm like, well, how can I have the trauma? How can my relatives and I have the trauma. Of course, we have a certain amount of trauma, but where's the trauma for the people who have wrecked everything? Like, how do you sleep at night? I didn't get that. I still can't compute that kind of way of thinking that, you know, the economic force is more powerful than the natural force. And that continues to be the way. We're still fighting that of thinking that the economy isn't about the ecology. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to limit my comments in the interest of time, and then hopefully we can open it up for a discussion at the end of the call for our panelists to talk to each other and to get participant questions as well. So the next panelist is Siriel. And the question is, what does stewardship mean to you?
Thank you. Yeah, so when I was thinking about this question, I like jotted down a few things that came to mind. So caretaking and connection. I don't know. When I think of stewardship, I feel like it is really important work, but there's also like that more nurturing kind of component to the term. And I also feel like for me, there's a sense of reciprocity and also a sense of duty or potentially responsibility, but one that is born out of love. So then I was like, maybe I don't know if I'm like on the right track. So like I did a little bit of Googling. And so the Google definition that first came up, I was not obsessed with, but it said the job of supervising or taking care of something such as an organization or property. So yeah, but there is like that component of care. So I was like, check. Then I like went to Wikipedia and like kind of skimmed through the first 4 lines, and it said stewardship is an ethic that embodies the responsibility, planning and management of resources. And you can kind of go on and read it if you're interested, but I kind of like that because I think that concept of ethic is perhaps what I was trying to articulate, like when I was talking about like that sense of duty, like that sense of responsibility. And then I went to Merriam-Webster, and the definition kind of said conducting or supervising or management of something, especially the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. So then again, there's my point about the care. So I found it interesting because I was thinking about this. The only point that wasn't really echoed through my little small, very, very small search was that point about reciprocity, which is, I think, perhaps the root of the issue with our climate crisis and all types of other crises, is that notion of like kind of disconnection or fracturing. So yeah, I think like nurturing like reciprocity, like beyond just like our built urban environments, I think is important. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Siriel. Our next panelist on the question, what does stewardship mean to you, is Anu.
I'm kind of going to echo a bit of what Betty said initially, because when I was thinking about this question too, I thought, well, stewardship, if I'm to think back at how, how Indigenous peoples stewarded the lands, or how any Indigenous peoples around the world would have stewarded the lands to make sure that that it would continue to protect what you have and take from it in a sustainable way to ensure that it's there for generations to come. And that now I think stewardship means more than that, and needs to mean more than that, because of some number of generations who have not taken that approach, and the industrialized world and how much has been degraded and destroyed. That stewardship goes beyond just taking care of what's around you, but also includes active protection, advocacy, and restoration of things that have not been taken care of. And I'll leave my make space for others.
Thank you so much. And then our last panelist for this question is Aura. What does stewardship mean to you?
I really have to agree with almost everything that was said by the other speakers. I mean, I have all of those same feelings. The only thing that I add is I do recognize that I came from a place of privilege to a certain extent in how I viewed stewardship as a child. But it seemed more hopeful. It seemed like a bit more raw, raw, raw. And so learning about stewardship a long time ago in school, I, I felt really positive about it growing up. I felt like we had the tools to make the changes that needed to be done. And it made me want to do more. But I don't feel the same sentiment being echoed with the youth today. And there's a scary, like Betty was saying, there's an urgency, which I agree with, but we have to almost do like, well, how I feel and like what it means to me. It also has to be like a two-step plan. I mean, I don't by any means have any answers, but taken care of, yes, but the next generation coming up has to be invested and not already be given up, because I see that in my own children. I see that they're thinking, I've actually come my 12-year-old on the lines that, Mom, it's super fucked up, like, and like there's no way we can fix it by the time I'm an adult. So doing this sort of in fields of like, well, in my case, land-based stewardship, because that's my interest, where we come to sort of talk and teach about plants as relatives, or that we're sort of all part of this ecosystem, and as human beings, we're not apart from it. That's connected me deeper to sort of the conventional or colonial models of stewardship. And I feel really deeply invested in those teachings for that reason. And so stewardship means to me like not just damage control, but also fostering caring for upcoming generations. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much. I guess I'll just say that I really liked what Betty had to say about stewardship, being like being uncomfortable, and there's a sense of like a very large sense of urgency and responsibility, and that was kind of echoed throughout. And Siriel mentioned reciprocity, which kind of was echoed a bit in, I felt, in Anu and Aura's response, that there's like that there's like a sense of like the plants as relatives. I feel like we in stewardship there's more care and thought, and seeing plants as relatives, and the earth as something to take care of. But we'll move on to the next question, which is, how did you come to understand your role in stewardship? So the first panelist for this question is Siriel.
So I think it's ever changing, like it amplifies and contracts. I think like in the past, my role was maybe like in the more public facing facets, probably maybe less present as a steward, but I think at the moment I'm a little bit more active as a steward. But yeah, I think it's that balance, finding kind of that balance for me, because I think I'm kind of maybe perhaps reaching a saturation point. But yeah, I think possibly things could change. I don't know. It's very dynamic, I find.
Okay, thank you. And then the next panelist is Anu. How did you come to understand your role in stewardship?
I'm still working on understanding my role. I don't think I have any of the answers yet. I'm still learning every day and still trying to figure it out. I have gone through different iterations of it. You know, am I an activist? Am I a scientist? Am I a this? Am I a that? And um, I think I've found that I'm more of I'm not so much interested in being out there and in the public eye, although I'm a little bit in the public eye right now, aren't I? Um, but more through in leadership through action, leadership through support, and working with others, I think is my understanding of my current role in stewardship, and there's always more to learn. Yeah, so I'm just out there with an open mind and an open heart, willing to learn more as I go along.
Thank you. And our next panelist is Aura.
How did I understand my role in stewardship? Like Anu just said, sort of really thinking about that, and it's always changing. I do some weaving, and how I view stewardship similar to how I feel when I sit at a really big loom. So sometimes it's really overwhelming, it's really complex. If the warp strings are too tight, they'll fray and they'll break. And if the warp strings are too loose, they won't hold the pattern of the weft. However, sort of individually working all the components together, it's also a surprisingly simple rhythm of creating fun. So I can think of myself as a thread in companionship with others, and I'm working towards this dance of what I can give, what I can take, and still have sort of something left over that looks like stewardship and what my role is in it.
Thank you. That's a beautiful metaphor. Our last panelist in this for this question is Betty. How did you come to understand your role in stewardship?
Like the others on the panel have said, I share their thoughts. And Aura, with the weaving, it's about being interwoven. So I think about that. So how did I come to understand through time, through my upbringing, the support of my family and friends? I'm a mom of three adults, and so and it was not at home. So there was a lot of flack about that, but I would not trade that time for anything. And I feel like yeah, it's been beneficial for my kids and I and their friends, and just the way I can relate to young people. I also feel like I'm a steward through my art and the art projects. So project and think of the concept, think of all the possibilities, get out to the world. There's a kind of, it's like a bit like stepping off a cliff and you don't know what's going to happen. But when it starts when the project starts to gel and you start to see the work and the reactions of people, that is a really rich time. So with the shorelines, when I'm getting I will use that project as an example of stewardship, because I realized that the age group of the Ocean Bridge participants is not an age group that is used to sending like letters so much. So that was like electronic platform, and how was that going to work? But when the packaging is smoky and it's really about, the kind of the sensory elements that we both share, and it doesn't have to even be spoken. So I really like that. And I read the messages and I look at the drawings and I look at the pieces of charcoal, and I've started grinding up the charcoal. So I have a lot of personal time with projects, and I like kind of the undocumented time absorbing all the energy that's gone into something. So I think of that as a kind of stewardship and a way of holding on to and 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 finding out about our world so that we do want to take care of it, and we do want to be stewards. So we have to want to be stewards, right? Because I know recently a 16-year-old kid said to me, I wish I would be able to live in the world that you lived in. And I realized what they meant about the environment. And I felt really sad. Said, I will continue my best to fight. Seemed all I could say, right? It's rocky out there. Yeah. Stewardship is never losing the paddles or the oars and just keeping going. Thanks.
I love that. Thank you. That kind of made me want to switch our order of questions to just, I will ask the question number 5, question number 6. So I'll switch them because this one seems kind of a natural next question is how does a traditional model of conservation fall short? So we'll start with Aura for this question, and then I'll double back. I'll go back and answer, do number 5 after this question.
Okay. Well, I do think that some contemporary stewardship ideas definitely get things right. I guess the next one is, I believe there's sort of room for growth. It's sort of first and foremost that Indigenous folks need a seat at the table. And I'm not just speaking about consulting on their own Indigenous lands. I'm talking about the full, across the gamut, like that people who have a direct relationship with the oceans, the waterways, and the land for thousands of years need to be in the leadership positions. Because how could they not? They have been within these systems and interacting with them longer than most folks. So there's that. I also sort of believe that we have to accept and sort of wrap our heads around this wildness when it comes, I'm speaking, I guess, of North America and specifically maybe the coast, because that's what I know about, that's where I am. So this wildness that we see, it's plentiful and it's diverse. It is that way because of Indigenous care and cultivation. So the abundance of that people are so attracted to and that we want to save and we want to conserve, it's no small part to thousands of years of Indigenous folks that have been respectfully interacting with the land. So they things like careful land burning management to make way for berries and camas prairies, ocean food technology that increased the clam species sizes in clam gardens. The salmon runs are, dwindling now, but at the time of colonial occupation, sort of coming in and people coming, they spoke about these naturally occurring, intense, massive salmon runs. But that's not giving credit for thousands of years to create plentiful salmon runs. I think it's a position that's starting to be held, but it still is often met with scrutiny. Terraces, expanding food production, increased sort of the biodiversity in estuary. It brought in botanical diversity by the work that and how with that in turn increased animal relatives to visit wetlands and so on and so on. So some of us, agreeably, as Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people, we have forgotten our relationship with lands and the water. There's so many Indigenous folks that have a deep ancestral teaching and ancestral laws that could guide us. And so I guess that's where I think where we're deeply but sort of, yeah, I guess so much. I have to keep it down to 3 minutes. Keep it down to 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. I mean, I agree 100%. And we'll be able to get, I think, at the end, maybe final comments. We can dive deeper as well and through questions from the group. And our next panelist is Betty. So the question is, how does a traditional model of conservation fall short?
In my lifetime, it's been made not to work, that the traditional models or traditional role has really been thwarted by the kind of the unceasing, relentless need for energy and power and just money driving things. It just makes me insane. So I mean, it makes many people insane, but I just feel like how do we keep giving voice to these old concepts and ways of thinking, the traditions, the heritage? Like, how can we do that without it being retranslated so that it's comfortable for the I don't like saying the dominant culture. I don't like talking about colonizers. All this academic language kind of gets in the way of talking about us as humans who are all on this planet together. But how can we work in a way that's reciprocal? It's not exclusive, but it is paying attention and giving voice to the actual everybody on the planet, not just the humans, the plants, the animals, everything. And they're all talking, and we're just like thinking about, I don't know, whatever we're thinking about, Netflix. I don't even know. Yeah. I think it's using Indigenous, traditional, scientific knowledge, sense of care and decency for everybody who lives on the planet.
Thanks so much. Siriel, you're the next panelist. The question is, how does a traditional model of conservation fall short?
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure, but for me, like when I think about conservation, it makes me think that we're either like operating in like destruction mode or like preservation mode. So yeah, so for me, it's like difficult to extract this from like our economies. And then once I start thinking about the economies, I start thinking about capitalism. So I think that that's also a big problem, is that we've invented our economies to not value these natural resources that we are reliant on to run our economies. Like they're just not factored in, but they like it's they give us so much, so it's just like a weird, like, it's, I don't know. I think, yeah, recognition is possibly a way to heal this model that we have, like, just, and that kind of also ties into other types of oppression. But yeah, just like that recognition piece for me would be like a good place to start, to create something different. But yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really like how you framed that as healing the model, and especially when we were talking about being hopeful in conservation earlier. Yeah, I feel like we can reimagine conservation and stewardship to be more wholesome and be more impactful. So the last panelist for this question is Anu. How does a traditional model of conservation fall short?
Dabney, I'm going to do you a favor by merging my response to this question and my response to the next question on journeys. And then you can
Okay.
skip me over. So I'm going to tell you a bit about my journey towards writing a book about people of color who are environmental defenders, and how that ties into why a traditional model of conservation falls short through my experience. So, going into the sciences, going into biology, going into conservation, whether, up until recently, now I'm working a lot with Indigenous people, so it's different now, but up until then, I would go do field work, I would go into a meeting, I would go to a conference, I would go work with an organization, and I would find myself as the only brown face in this sea of whiteness, and I'd be looking around and thinking, like, why, what's going on? Why is that? How is this possible? This is not reflective of who actually cares about the environment and who wants to work for the environment and who's being affected by environmental issues and who has the wisdom that can influence what we're doing, and why are those people not in this room and why are they not involved? And so I took that, sort of that thought and let it sit for a while, and I had this opportunity to explore it a bit more, and then that sort of branched out and in and became a book destined for younger readers or any readers, where the purpose is to celebrate and uplift the voices of people whose voices don't normally get uplifted or heard in this quote unquote environmental movement. And I think it's really important to understand that there are a lot of different pathways, there are a lot of different cultures, there are a lot of different knowledge systems, experiences, and ways of interacting with the natural world that need to be taken into consideration, and raised up and broadcast out there so that people know that you can't just look at the conservation world as, this is how we do it and we don't need to talk to anybody else. And I can go on and on about it, but I won't do that. But it is one of the questions that I did explicitly ask the people, the 20 people that I interviewed in the book, was what is it about you, your identity, your background, your culture that enabled you to achieve something that the mainstream environmental movement wouldn't have otherwise achieved? And they all had an answer for that. And I think, the real movement reflects more the people who are on this call and the people who are around us in the world, and they all have a reason to do why they're doing it. So thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. I just realized I was not muted for this, so I hope that wasn't distracting. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we'll just jump right into that next question then. Thank you, Anu. The next question is, how did you come to be where you are, and what did your journey look like? So Anu was our first panelist for that question, and so our next is Aura.
I mean, I talked a little bit about it, and those of you that joined from the BC cohort, we did talk about these things, and I told you a little bit about myself and a lot about myself. So my journey sort of looked like, as I sort of already said, I mean, I definitely had for the idea that plants can heal. I had a healthy respect for nature healing us. I grew up in a hippie family named Aura. And those were always modeled for me. Those were, thinking outside the box was definitely encouraged. But I didn't have that element of culture, like I already said earlier. And it wasn't until some Indigenous elders who I worked with sort of seeked me out to take me under their wing, that it sort of lit up for me. And I can't, express the amount of gratitude and the luck and the joy that it brought me. And it felt like coming home. So it felt like, it's talking about it. but I'm totally going to get emotional. Like, it felt like, I mean, I had a father, like I mentioned, that was Indigenous who didn't grow up with any connection, but he was a searcher and a wanderer, and it wasn't unlike him to disappear, which sounds awful, but it wasn't, maybe for my mom, but into the forest for weeks at a time. So he was searching. He was the same in the sense there's this component missing. It's empty, and so sorry. Being able to connect with our culture on his behalf, he passed away when I was quite young, was pretty powerful. Like I said, without getting emotional, don't get emotional, don't get emotional. So my journey, how I got here was quite honestly luck or divine interference. I'm not really sure where I stand on those things sometimes. But without people reaching out for me, I kind of have to claw my way into a community. Yeah, I guess that's how I came to be where I am. I don't really know. I'll get off topic if I start talking more. Thank you.
Oh, nothing's off topic. Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's see. Our next, okay, I like messed myself up because we went out of order, but the next panelist, is Betty. So how did you come to be where you are, and what did your journey look like?
I've been pivoting before 2020. It's like to put that out there. Journey's always complicated, lots of unexpected things, emotional. I've always been a maker and an artist. I feel like it's taken me, that's doing my entire life, and it's the only way I really kind of know how to interact maybe with my inner self and the external world for sure. But the communities that I grew up in, back then, people didn't talk about the 7 teachings or the grandfather teachings or the medicine wheels or anything like that. It was, the teachings were, the Cree people were my relatives, very quiet. Sometimes they didn't even to give you a teaching, or they would make something and that would be the teaching. But I do feel that the 7 grandfather teachings were there all along. And so, you know, love, respect, humility, and wisdom. And I try to do it in my, as best I can. So that's how I kind of got where I am. And yeah, I mess up, I do things better. One day, you know, I'm very much
Thank you so much. Yes, it's a journey. I have to tell myself that too. I just wanted to let everyone know that we are going to go over time, but please stick around. We have one more question, and then we will open it up to you all to either type questions into the chat or unmute yourself and ask our panelists directly your questions. And hopefully then we can kind of open it up to a larger group discussion and just kind of chat and see where the conversation goes. So our last panelist for this question is Siriel. So how did you come to be where you are, and what does your journey look like?
Okay, so in the interest of time, I'll just kind of touch on the point that I really wanted to, hammer home is, or something that was really important for me to learn, I think, was when I initially started out to want to do urban planning, I had the intent of working with small island communities and doing coastal planning, but internationally. So I really wanted to have a tropical lifestyle and do good work, but in a place where I could be nice and warm and, running around half naked most of the time. So I kind of started that path, and then I realized I was living in Cambodia doing a really cool project, and I was really wanting to stay, but I couldn't find another contract to stay. But I just like had this reflection because in Cambodia they have the most NGOs after Rwanda in the world, and so there's a lot of what they call themselves. I wouldn't use this term, but they call themselves expats. So I've met a lot of people that were doing a lot of great work, but it just didn't resonate with me because I was hearing them speak and then I was like, okay, but where did you come from? What did you do like in your own community? Like it just the vibe was not right. And so that really shook me up. And then I took that as a sign when my contract ended, I had to come back to Canada and I was like, it's really time for you to think about like you want to do this international development work, like what impact have you had in your own home community? So yeah, I think that was something that was really important for me to kind of reflect on, and that's kind of the piece that I'm working on now. Yeah, to kind of do this work at home before then going out and trying to have um, that impact elsewhere. So yeah.
Thank you so much. We just have one more question. It is a combined kind of question, and I don't want you to feel rushed, even though we're at time, because we are going to go over for the participant questions. So this last question is, how does your community and your culture inform your work? Which is loaded, and I feel like we could have had an entire panel on this question. But I will open that up to Betty for as the first panelist for this question.
Yeah, there's so much richness in this afternoon. I so community and culture both give me lots of hope, and they give me friendship and solidarity, a feeling of solidarity, and yeah, that's a few kind of fuel that we need is feel like that we can do this important work that we have to do in all the different ways we do it, in small ways and large ways. So I think it's important to remember that, nobody, it's not a competitive thing to be a steward. It's just about trying. I felt last year after being in Ottawa with the Ocean Bridge cohort, and it was pre-pandemic, of course, in January, and I felt so much hope, and that was really exciting to me, and I continue to feel hope. So, and then I cry a little bit, but thanks so much.
Thank you. Our next panelist for this question is Siriel. So how does your community and your culture inform your work?
I think I guess I am a product of my community. And so I try to maintain like that connection to my communities through, I guess, more my service work. But yeah, my culture is also a part of who I am. So I think that's how I continue to show up authentically. Like I wear my spices, I wear my Black Lives Matter t-shirt, and I am youth. So wherever I go and I have to present myself in a professional way, if I can get away with it, I will wear jeans because that is who I am. And I don't feel like I should have to alter myself, like I think about my mother and I know the things that she had to kind of put up to do the work that she had to do. And even my aunt, like I probably wouldn't be in with locks today if I hadn't seen my aunt, get knighted with her dreadlocks in Buckingham Palace. So I think that as you are showing up, like representing yourself, who you are is also a signpost for other people, that they can also get involved. It's not necessarily always direct. I think my culture and my community is yeah, that's how I think about that.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. I'm going to type a thing in the chat and then you ended. So our next panelist for this question is Anu.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I come from a culture of people that would never have encouraged me to go into the field of environmental work. It's not one that has status. It's not one that has particularly good incomes. It was not really on the radar. But if I think back, and I've been doing this kind of after having asked a whole bunch of other people the same question and never having to ask it to myself, thinking back and looking into the cultural elements and understanding why these holistic approaches fit better with me and reflect better how I see the world. And it's because of my culture, and it's because of different cultures in India where my family comes from. Seeing the world and seeing the universe and seeing everything in it as all connected, and that we're not, that the things that we do have repercussions around us, and that we will receive the actions, we will receive the repercussions of those actions, if not in this lifetime, in another lifetime. There are some cultures in India where, they don't harm insects, they don't harm anything, they don't pull out root plants, because anything can be a reincarnation of your relatives. And so there's this connection between all living and non-living things that's always been there, and that crosses through other cultures as well. And I think that's what, if I come back to that, and that really, I mean, that's what ecology is about as well, is the study of the connections between things. Um, and and so I think that the unity and the underlying message behind all of that and is something that carries through to all the work that I do. And the community side of it, I have many communities as well, just like Cyril has said, and so understanding who those are, they come into play in different aspects of the work, and it's an interesting and fun challenge to see how to bring all of these different aspects of who I am together into a single project, into multiple projects, and see where those intersections can happen. So it's constantly interesting.
Thank you so much. And lastly, Aura, how does your community and your culture inform the work that you do?
I don't think there isn't any part of work that I do that isn't informed by my culture. And that means also including my non-Indigenous culture. And I started feeling right some of the wrongs as well, and that sort of informs the work and that. For instance, I discovered that one of my ancestors actually founded a residential school. Oh. I mean, I don't need to carry it, but I feel like I carry it. And so that's this sort of dichotomy within me. So yeah, all of my cultural background informs my work. There isn't a part that I can't say it doesn't. In terms of my community, I have lots of separate communities, but in the last few years, it's been only really work because and isolation and those sort of things. And I miss it. I have a hard time growing without community. So some people prefer that. That's not something that is ideal for me, but some of the trade-offs, I suppose. But my community was other educators and the people that came and visited where we are. And now with COVID, it's a starting realization when that is taken away, you know, that I didn't fight hard enough for more community, because once I lost one, I didn't. And you know, I know a lot of people are in the same boat, and these are the times, and it's everybody's doing the best they can. But it was kind of a shocking revelation. I don't know if I have the right answer, Sarah, for that at the moment.
That's okay. That's a great answer. Thank you so much. I agree wholeheartedly with everyone on this question. It's we bring, well, I guess I can't speak for other people, but I tend to bring my whole self to everything, and your journey kind of on thinking about the other questions in this panel discussion. It's just like everything that we do, and our journey kind of allows us to, I don't know, have these full dynamic things that inform the work that we do. So yeah, thank you so much to the panelists, and thank you to everyone who joined the call. Now we will open it up to questions from the participants or from you all who have signed into the call. If you want to unmute yourself to ask a question, please do that, or type the question into the chat and I can read it. Yeah, thank you.